The day I found out my husband had slept with my mother, every single part of me shattered. I remember that evening so well. The way the sky was dim and heavy with clouds, how I could hear the slow ticking of the wall clock as I sat waiting for him to come home. He was late again. It had become a routine. The late nights, the distant texts, the sudden showers when he came home as if to wash off guilt. But that night, my mother's perfume on his jacket wasn't something I could ignore. It was the floral scent she had worn since I was a little girl, the one that used to make me feel safe. That scent now became the symbol of my destruction. That I am Eliza, or more precisely, I was once Mrs. Daniel Mitchell. My husband, Daniel, was kind, charming, and career-driven, or so it appeared. My mother, Miranda, was one of those women who always needed to be at the very center of attention, even as she grew older, carrying herself with the mien and elegance of a 25-year-old. Just those infrequent perfect outfits and too much flirting with men around her. Never too much, though. She was my mom, but basically was my greatest rival, without ever saying it. She had smiled in that knowing way that made me uncomfortable the first time I had introduced Daniel to her. She had hugged him too long, complimented his eyes, and giggled like a teenager. I brushed it off. After all, she was just being her usual self. But I didn't realize that her fascination would turn into something far darker. It started subtly. Daniel would go to her house when I wasn't around, always with some kind of excuse like, she needed help fixing the door. Or, she called me about your dad's old stuff. I believed him because at that time I trusted them more than I trusted myself. But the universe has this cruel way of showing the truth. One morning, I got a text meant for someone else. It was from Daniel, but it wasn't meant for me. The message read, Asterisk, I missed last night. You looked beautiful under me. Asterisk, my stomach twisted as I stared at the screen. I replied with shaking fingers, pretending to be her. Asterisk, I miss you too. Asterisk, the reply came instantly. Asterisk, we'll figure this out soon. I'll leave her. Asterisk, that was when the world stopped. I felt my knees give way, my vision blur. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that I had misunderstood. But deep down I knew. It all made sense in that one moment, the distance, the lies, the late-night showers. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was cheating with my own mother. They didn't deny it when I confronted them. My mother looked me right in the eye and said, You never appreciated him, Eliza. You took him for granted. Daniel stood beside her, silent, ashamed but not enough to walk away. They told me they were in love, that it just happened, that they couldn't fight it. He filed for divorce 2 weeks later. 3 months later they married. My mother wore white again at 50-something years old. She looked radiant and cruel. The whole town whispered about it, the scandal, the betrayal, the sheer and utter absurdity of it all. I became the woman whose husband left her for her mother. The humiliation followed me everywhere. Pain does strange things to people. It breaks some and transforms others. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even attend their wedding. I went silent. And in that silence I began to plan that I knew Daniel's weaknesses, his greed, his ego, his obsession with reputation. I knew my mother's vanity, her hunger to stay young, her need to be admired. They thought they had won, that I was broken beyond repair. But they underestimated the woman they had created. That I took back control of my life. I rebuilt my career first. Always the quiet one in our marriage, I had always let Daniel make the decisions. But now I put every ounce of pain into my work. Within a year I was promoted twice. Within 2 I was able to buy my own house and start my business. Every success was another quiet strike against them. Then I started digging. Daniel had always been careless with money. He had borrowed funds under my name before, and I knew where to look. I found proof of tax fraud, shady business deals, and secret accounts he never told anyone about. As for my mother, she had invested everything she owned into Daniel's new venture. Every penny. I smiled when I saw the documents, because I knew exactly what to do. I anonymously reported Daniel's illegal financial activities to the authorities. A few months passed and the investigation started. Slowly, everything began falling apart for them. Their accounts were frozen, his business was shut down, and the house they had bought together was seized. They had to move into a small apartment in another town. My mother, the woman who loved luxury more than love itself, couldn't stand the aftermath. Her beauty started vanishing due to stress and regret. But I wasn't done. I made sure the people around them knew the truth, not just that they had betrayed me, but how Daniel had juggled money around, how my mother had knowingly participated in deceit. I didn't lie. I only let the truth breathe. And rumors like wildfire spread fast. Their names became a synonym for pity and disgust. The last time I saw them, they were at the courthouse. Both were thinner, older, weathered from the consequences of their actions. My mother tried to speak to me, her eyes welling up with tears. "Eliza, please help us," she whispered. I looked at her, feeling nothing but cold clarity. "You made your choice," I said softly. "Now live with it." The sentence was 3 years in prison. My mother, now alone and bankrupt, relocated to some small town no one cared to visit. I heard she spends most of her days drinking, staring out the window, waiting for someone who will never come. As for me, I never remarried. Not because I couldn't, but because I learned that peace was better than companionship built on lies. I built a new life free of betrayal, where I no longer needed validation from anyone. Sometimes late at night I still think about that floral perfume, the one which used to mean safety. Now it's just a memory of what I survived. I didn't just ruin their lives out of vengeance. I revealed the rot they had built their love upon. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not screaming, not the obvious kind of revenge, but the quiet and relentless strength in watching those who wronged you destroy themselves as you rise from the ashes they thought would bury you. Because in the end they lost everything. Each other, their dignity, their peace. And I gained the one thing they could never steal from me again, my freedom. I used to think that love was supposed to feel like safety, that when you finally found the person who saw you for who you truly were, you could stop running from pain, from loneliness, from the fear of being forgotten. But I was wrong. For on the night that was supposed to be the most beautiful of my life, the night I became his wife, I sat in a room smelling of flowers and perfume, listening to the sound of my heart breaking. The wedding had been perfect, at least from the outside. Above the marble floor, the fairy lights danced. The music floated softly in the air as our guests clapped to our first dance together. He looked like a dream in his navy blue suit, his hand steady on my waist. Everyone said we were meant to be. I smiled. Even though something inside me felt slightly off, he'd been distracted all week. Phone calls taken in private, long silences broken with half-hearted excuses. When I asked, he said, "It's just work, love. You know how clients are before big deals." And I believed him, because that's what love does. It blinds you with trust. When the reception finally ended, I followed him to the car in my white gown, which trailed behind me like a ghost. We drove to the hotel. He had booked a luxury suite with golden lights, soft champagne sheets, and a balcony overlooking the quiet city. It was almost midnight when we arrived. He asked me to wait in the room while he had to take care of something downstairs. He kissed my forehead, told me he'd be back soon, and walked out. That was the last time he touched me that night. First, I didn't worry. Maybe he spoke to the hotel manager or a friend, I thought. I took my jewelry off, one piece at a time, with each sound of a clasp opening just too loudly in the silent room. Then an hour after, then another. The candles we had lit burned halfway down, and the laughter from the hall disappeared into nothing. That I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. My hands shook as I typed the words, "Where are you?" But the message just showed one gray tick. I sat on the edge of the bed in my wrinkled wedding dress, my hair falling from its pins, mascara tracing faint shadows under my eyes. The silence was heavy, pressing down like a weight I couldn't lift. And then I heard it. A sound soft at first, like a whisper slipping through the air vents. I froze. It was his voice. I couldn't make out every word, but I knew the tone, that low, tender murmur he used when he was being affectionate. The kind of voice that once made me melt. Only now it wasn't for me. Because he said her name. A name I didn't recognize, whispered softly, followed by a sigh. My heart stopped. I told myself it couldn't be. That maybe I was imagining it. That exhaustion or nerves were playing tricks on me. But then I heard a soft laugh, a woman's, distant yet distinct. Something inside me just shattered. I stood up, my legs trembling, and pressed my ear against the wall. The sound was coming from the suite next door. For a moment I couldn't breathe. He wasn't at the lobby, he wasn't busy, he was here. With someone else. I didn't remember crossing the room. I didn't remember opening the door or stepping into the dimly lit corridor. I just remember my heartbeat. Loud, violent, almost painful. I got to his door and stopped. My hand hovered over the handle, but I couldn't turn it. I could still hear the muffled sounds, his voice, the rhythm of movement, the laughter that didn't belong to me. The world spun that I walked away, back to our suite, back to that bed where he would hold me, whisper promises, and make me believe we had forever. That I sat there until dawn, staring at the pale blue light creeping through the curtains. When he finally returned, he smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. He froze when he saw me awake. "Hey, you're still up," he said, trying to sound casual, running a hand through his hair. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. The man I had loved for 5 years. The man I had said yes to in front of everyone I knew. The man who left me all alone on our wedding night. He walked towards me slowly, but I stepped back. "Where were you?" I asked. He hesitated. "I told you, love, I had to." "Don't lie," I interrupted, voice breaking. "I heard you." He froze. "What?" "I heard you. Through the wall. You said her name." For a while he said nothing. His gaze broke away, his throat constricting. Then he whispered, "You don't understand." Those words, I will never forget them, because they weren't a refusal. They were a confession. It wasn't until later that morning that I found her name again. Not whispered this time, but written. On his phone. Dozens of messages, some from before our wedding. Her name was Lynette. He had met her at work. She was just a friend. At least that's what he told me months ago when I saw her number saved under a false name. And I had believed him. He said it started as a mistake, that he'd tried to end it. Marriage to me was supposed to make everything right. But love that's built with lies doesn't heal, it decays. When I asked him if he loved her, he didn't answer. Silence was enough. The days that followed blurred together. I moved through them like a shadow of myself, smiling for the world while something inside me was quietly dying. He tried to fix things, brought flowers and apologized, asking me to forget that night. But how do you forget the moment your heart realizes it was never enough? We stayed under one roof for a few weeks, posing as newlyweds, pretending to eat and sleep and breathe like normal couples. But every night, as he would turn off the lights, I could feel the distance, the invisible wall built from guilt and betrayal. Sometimes I caught him staring at his phone, his fingers hovering over her name. I once even heard him cry in the shower. And that hurt too, because even in his guilt I wanted to comfort him. That's the curse of love. It keeps you tied to the person who breaks you. One night I packed a small bag. He was sleeping, or at least pretending he was. I no longer cared. I left my ring on the bedside table and a note that simply said, "You left me alone once. I'm doing the same now." The air was cold outside, the streets empty. I walked until the hotel was out of sight. I did not know where I was going, only that I needed to move, to escape the silence that had become too heavy to bear. I stayed at a friend's apartment for a while. I ignored his calls, his messages, the letters he sent through mutual friends. He had told me he broke things off, that he wanted another chance. But some things once broken can't be rebuilt. Months went by. I learned to live alone again. To make coffee just for one, to fall asleep without waiting for footsteps in the hallway. But healing wasn't beautiful. It was slow, messy, and full of memories that I couldn't erase. I once found her picture by accident, just scrolling down the website of the company she works for. She was beautiful. I hated her for existing, even though deep down I knew he was the one who made the choice. Sometimes I would see couples in cafes, laughing over coffee, fingers interlocked, and my chest would tighten. I used to be that girl. Now I was just the woman who got left behind on her wedding night. He contacted me a year later. He wanted to meet. I agreed, though it was very much against my better judgment. We met at the same cafe where we'd had our first date. Irony at its cruelest. He looked tired, older somehow. I could see regret in his eyes, but also something else, resignation. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You didn't deserve any of it." "I know," I replied. He told me he had left her months ago, that it wasn't worth it, that he thought about me every day. But I didn't feel anything, no anger, no longing, just emptiness. "You broke something in me," I said quietly. "I know," he whispered. "And I will never forgive myself." We sat in silence for a while. Outside it began to rain. People ran for cover, but I didn't move. The rain felt honest, cold, cleansing, real. When I finally stood up to leave, he said, "Do you think you'll ever love again?" I smiled sadly. "I think I'll learn to. But not like before." That night I went home and pulled out the wedding dress I'd kept locked away. The fabric had yellowed some, the lace frayed. It no longer looked magical, just heavy. I took it to the balcony, held it for a long time and let it go. Wind caught it and it was carried over the edge, and for an instant it seemed it was flying free. And I realized maybe I was too. He left me alone on our wedding night. And maybe that was the night I began to find myself again. The house on the corner of Willow Lane was unmistakable, not due to its grand or modern construction but because of the wild garden surrounding it. Once this was the most beautiful garden in the village. Roses climbed its walls and tulips lined its path. The scent of lavender wafted in the air like a song. To everyone it was Auntie Sobi's garden. But that was before. Now weeds reached up to the windows where flowers once had. The gate hung loose on its hinges. The paint had started peeling from the fence. The woman didn't come out in her morning routine, softly humming, to water her flowers anymore. Auntie Sobi had lost her husband, Peter, just a year ago. He was her companion for almost 4 decades, gentle, witty, always with the faintest hint of soil in his hands because he loved to garden as much as she did. They had built the garden together with patience and love, planting each flower as if it were a memory. When Peter died suddenly that winter evening, the world around her just went silent. The kettle whistled along, the clock kept its beat, but it was all far and hollow. The garden was unbearable to look at anymore. Every petal now reminded her of him. His laughter, his warmth, the voice from the yard calling out, "Sobi, come see this one. It's blooming early this year." So she closed the curtains and let the seasons pass without her. The neighbors missed her, and so did the children who used to peek through the fence because of the butterflies. But nobody dared disturb Auntie Sobi. Grief is fragile and nobody wanted to break her further. Then one spring morning, a boy named Oliver moved in next door with his family. He was 10, curious, talkative, and far too honest for his age. On his first week in the neighborhood, he peered through Auntie Sobi's broken gate and frowned. "It's sad," he whispered to his mother. "It looks like the flowers are waiting for her." He lay in bed that night, unable to get the image of the empty garden out of his mind. The next day, walking home from school, he left a small packet of seeds, marigolds, on her doorstep with a note that said, "Maybe they miss you too." Later that evening, Auntie Sobi found it. She read the note over and over, her lips trembling between a frown and a smile. She set it on her kitchen table, thinking she'd throw it away later. But she didn't. The next morning, the sun falling through the slats of her curtains woke her up, the same warm light that once had guided her hands to plant tulips beside Peter. She got up and opened the window without thinking. The smell of earth filtered in raw and real. For the first time in months, she breathed it deep into her lungs. The next day she went outside. The air was still cool. The soil had gotten damp from last night's rain. She knelt down beside an empty patch of dirt, her fingers trembling as they brushed away the weeds. She could almost hear Peter's voice teasing her. "Don't forget to talk to them, Sobi. Flowers love conversation." She chuckled softly. Then she cried. Days turned into weeks. She went back to spending her mornings in the garden. The seeds of the marigolds Oliver gave her started to sprout. Neighbors walking by saw her there, her sleeves rolled up, her hat tilted against the sun, and they couldn't help but smile. They began helping one by one, quietly, kindly. Someone fixed the fence, another brought rose cuttings, and children painted little wooden signs with names such as Sobi's Smile, Peter's Rose, and the Hope Corner. With summer, the garden blooms again. More brilliant, fuller, and alive than it has ever been. It wasn't perfect, but neither was she. The colors now feel different. Not reminders of loss but proof that love could grow even from sorrow. One evening, Auntie Sobi sat on the old wooden bench that Peter had built years ago. The sun was already low, casting a golden light over the flowers. She closed her eyes and said in a whisper, "Look, Peter, they're blooming again." The wind rustled softly through the roses, as if answering her. From her gate, Oliver waved. "Your garden's happy again," he shouted. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. "Yes," she said, "it finally is."